Okay, we're going to get started with the Go Giver Leader. This is going to be hopefully a brief one. We got some nice notes from this, but each chapter actually wraps up with bullet points, which I think is fantastic. And so you should just go through, highlight those, tab those. But let's dive right on in. Hopefully, you have read The Go Giver, which is a fantastic book. In fact, I just had an espresso before starting this video. So, first, into the introduction. We've got the 5 laws of stratospheric success, which all revolve around the idea that a giving mindset is the key to a rich and fulfilling life. One of those 5 laws is the law of influence, which says that your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. As you guys know, I'm a big fan of How to Win Friends and Influence People, so I thought that was important, laying that out in the introduction. Chapter 1 is about taking leadership, and it introduces Ben and Pindar and some of the main characters of the parable. The question, chapter 2, I didn't have any highlights in chapter 1. Chapter 2, the less you say, the more influence you'll have. Ben nodded thoughtfully in an effort to be polite. Do you know why that is? She added. No, I don't, replied Ben. Why? Because the more you yield, the more power you have. So I just thought that brief exchange was very powerful, because not only do we see in sales the concept of when they're talking, you're winning is the way it goes. So I just thought that the more you yield, the more influence you have was just very relevant from my personal experience, and also just very impactful to read. Chapter 3, the top floor. So this is where he meets Alan of the chair company that his firm is looking to buy, merge with. So my first highlight is the hard part isn't the vision. Anyone can come up with a vision. The hard part is the holding. And it's the holding that is hard, right? And this is just like impactful, because the more that you can hold on to something, we know the statistics, right? Like, of the people who write down their goals, only like it's like less than 10%, maybe less than 3% of people actually return to it year after year to like review, did they meet their goal? And that to me is holding on to the vision. So like, if I go back in a diary 10 years ago that I wrote, more than 10 years ago, that I wrote when I was 19, what was my vision then? How close am I to that vision now? What's lined up? And holding the vision is the hard part, because you have to think 5 years in, have I been doing what I should have been doing when I was 19, etc. And it adds up over time. So holding the vision is hard, whether that's the gym or success in life or whatever your discipline may be. My next highlight in the chapter about the substance of influence. Pull is the substance of influence, not push. Right? So when you create a personality, when you are somebody who pulls other people into your orbit, you don't have to go into other people's orbit. You pull them in. You have gravity, right? So you have the influence. Was my takeaway from that. The end of this part, Ben's keys to legendary leadership. Here goes nothing, he muttered. Let the legend begin. Humming the first few bars of the theme from Superman, he added a new line below the title he had so carefully lettered. Key 1, hold the vision. He sat back and thought about his day, and then he turned a new blank page and began to write. Hold the vision. Lead with your mind. Anyone can come up with a vision. The hard part is the holding. Building a business, building anything, is an act of faith. Keep seeing in your mind's eye where it is you're going, even when nobody else does, especially when nobody else does. And so, like, when you're going through hell, keep on going. That's what I get from that, especially when nobody else does. Never forget where you came from, and watch your personal pronouns, right? So the personal pronouns comes from watch how you identify yourself, because to use kind of the things that you say can affect you. You can place, curses on yourself, so to speak. Chapter 5, the heart of the operation. My first tab is just service. Augustine corrected. We don't make a distinction. Customers, employees' families, the community, it's all just service, right? We are here for each other. And the most successful people I've admired in my life or have seen go far do it out of service to others, right? What are you serving others? I just love that. My next highlight, give people something good to live up to, something great, and they usually will. In fact, often they'll exceed those expectations. And this just reminds me of surround yourself with the people who have a greater vision for you than you do, right? And then those who choose to be around you, make sure that you hold them in a high esteem, that you have a greater vision for their outcomes than even they do. That's not having expectations, that's just having well wishes and prayers to the success of the people that, you hang out with, right? Positivity. My next highlight, I highlighted this quote and paragraph. Isn't that how it always is? Just when you think you've lost something so precious, you can't even recover from it. And then, if you keep your eyes open and your heart open, you find that the loss has made room for something else of great value, something you never would have found otherwise. That is huge to me because tried and failed, right? Nothing ventured, nothing gained. And anybody who has tried and failed and lost and suffered in certain ways can tell you that this is so true, that you have to you have to see, depending on the angle, like everything is a blessing depending from your perspective on what you look at it. The language of strength, chapter 6. My first highlight: the more you yield, the more power you have. So I'm just repeating, I mean, that's how impactful it is. My next highlight is a quote: but you win doesn't have to mean I lose. Quite the contrary. Letting the other person win is the beginning of one's own triumph. And when you read that and put it into action, you live that for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, you really do see the fruits of that labor, so to speak, that labor of love, that labor of service. It does come back to you. In other words, you're right. Yielding does mean giving your power away, but the more you give away, the more you have. And that, I can only speak from personal experience. Like my mother is such a giving person, and she's so awesome, and people love her because she gives so much of herself to the good of those that she surrounds herself with, and family and all of that. And so like that giving, the more you yield, the more you give, the more you have. It's very apparent if you've been in that environment. Everyone likes being acknowledged for doing a good job, she agreed. And then I go on to highlight a paragraph and a half later: whether you react or respond, it tends to foster the same behavior in the other person. My next highlight: tact, in fact, is the language of strength. Having tact literally means being in touch with the other person. And when you treat someone with tact, it allows them to stay intact. Okay, yes, cheesy, but still highlight worthy, because caring for other people, supporting other people helps them hold it together. My next highlight: but getting people to do what you want them to, whether or not they really want it for themselves, Aunt Elle continued, that's just manipulation. Any second rate television commercial can do that. And so this is important to me because this is like an ethical fine line of why I have not been successful, whether by this ethical limitation or what. But you know that there's the rocket burst of energy when someone thinks they have a good idea or does anything to sell. We're all aware of this in some manner. It becomes culturally apparent in some way. And so that's why this word even exists, this manipulation. So helping people stay intact, and then talking about manipulation: your ability to get people to do what you want them to. Your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first, which I think was already said, but here it is again. And there's nothing wrong with the repetition to really ingrain the message. All right. Ben's keys to legendary leadership. Key number 1, reviewing from the first part: hold the vision. And now he added another line to his list. Key 2, build your people. Lead from the heart. Give people something good to live up to, something great, and they usually will. The more you yield, the more power you have. The substance of influence is pull, not push. Tact is the language of strength. And don't react, respond. Chapter 7, the work. My first highlight in this chapter is that's why they call it a decision, replied Frank. If you had all the information, there'd be nothing to it. But sometimes you have to decide, even when you don't have all the information. And this is a key theme repeated a lot of times in business, is that, and maybe just a key lesson that you learn when you sit on the fence too long, is that if you generally have all of the information to make a decision, by the time you make it, it's too late because you spent too much time trying to gather information instead of just making the decision. And so the more I've learned to quote unquote trust your gut, but just like trusting your gut just comes back to reading, being knowledgeable, absorbing proper information, having a good information diet, and making sure that you're staying disciplined in a multifaceted way throughout different areas of your life. Because without it, then right, this work doesn't exist. Right, this ability to just like be content and happy and have purpose. Right, if you don't make decisions, otherwise, other people end up making them for you. Being Muddy, chapter 8. My first highlight. But at one point, he made a conscious decision to excel. And this is when we're talking about Pindar, who's one of the main characters. But I just think that that's so key. Because think about how many times you've chosen to just be better. And then you see the fruits 5 years, 7 years, 8 years, 10 years later. And it's like that decision you made to excel. And you can continue to do it. And then hopefully if you've had a life well lived, you've had right these tragedies that they talked about, these perspective changing experiences that why might seem a great loss at the time may have led you to choose to like not excel. And then now you have this experience, this perspective of like, oh, this is how I deal with loss, this is what can happen. And then you continue to have to make that conscious choice to continue excelling. But whatever he did, he always took the time to make sure he understood what it was his clients would need and exactly how his product or service would fulfill that need. Pindar himself says his number one secret is giving. You heard Aunt El describe his law of influence. Your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first. Again, this is the third time they've repeated this. He's a very giving person, and he also knows how to do the work, right? Like, it's fantastic to be nice, and the world needs more nice people, and we need to all make an effort to just be nice and kind, but we also have to do the work, right? Because we can't just get by on an economy of purpose, an economy of niceness and giving, right? We have to do the hard work. And while we live in such a great time, an abundant time, more and more people are able to just get by and not do the work, and that's just the nature of where we're at. And so if you really want to excel and you really want to be majorly successful, right, you have to do what the 99% aren't, right? You have to make these sacrifices. You have to be so giving in such a way. If you want to be hugely successful, she says, you have to stay hugely humble, is the next highlight and tab. I have a huge paragraph highlighted over here. Shall I tell you Aunt Elle's take on humility? Said Claire. Please, said Ben. It struck him fascinating that even though Claire's mentor was not with them today, her presence somehow seemed to command the conversation. Aunt Elle says there are few terms more misunderstood in our culture. People often equate humility with a lack of confidence or self-esteem, or think that being humble means being weak. And of course, Claire lifted her chin and peered along her nose at Ben. They have it backwards. The more humble you are, the more personal power you have. Remember your muddy beginnings and you can accomplish anything. And I think that is also powerful. This is just such a powerful way to teach a lesson of humility, right? Meekness doesn't mean weakness. It doesn't mean you're a pushover, and just because you're nice doesn't mean that, you're easily taken advantage of. In fact, it means the opposite. And it does seem to me that the longer things go on, the more that those people just end up wounding themselves. My next highlight: people achieve great things that the world will never forget. Start out by accomplishing small things that the world will never see. And that's just part of doing the work. That's just like grinding in the lesson of like, you just have to do the things. You have to build and build and build and build and build and build and build, and then have it torn down and then build anyway and build and build and build and build and build and start over and build and build and build and build and build. These are all lessons that is just etched out through history. You can't worry about the outcome, Claire added quietly. Just do the work, and not only because it needs doing, but also because that's the only way you'll generate real respect. And so when we get to that, when we get to that, when we get to that lesson, that is where and what it all comes down to. And if you don't have respect, for years, and I still do this, I made it look easy even though I was doing the work. And it was kind of like a little nasty little trick I guess I played on people looking in, but the truth is you have to do the work. You can't skimp and scrape by. And like that stuff that people don't see, those hours in the library, those hours in the gym, those hours poring over books, those hours forcing yourself to wake up early to read or work out, that time when you're alone with yourself, the the discipline, what comes through, what is the voice, right? That's where he says, watch your personal pronouns. And it's like, what is that story you're telling yourself? Ben's keys to legendary leadership, adding key number 3, do the work. Hold the vision, build your people, do the work. Do the work. Lead from your gut. Know your pegs and shims. That's a callback to the chapter. So you got to get the book to read it to understand that one. But it's good. Stay hugely humble. Stay grounded. Get mud on your boots and trust yourself. I think trusting yourself is a big lesson that you have to learn throughout time, right? You have to learn to trust yourself. Chapter 9, birth and death. But it's not about doing, it's about being here, right? So it's not about doing, it's about being. And I love this story. This one really stood out because he goes and visits someone in the hospital who he doesn't know. It's, the mother of one of the workers of the firm that they're trying to acquire. And so it's like, it's just like this really powerful story that like everything you do can and does matter in many ways. And those conscious choices leads into, we can't control any of it. Not really. What we can control is who we are. And so those choices of like controlling what we do does determine who we are. What we choose to be, not think or hope or wish, but how we choose to be determines how much control we have over our lives. People will only trust someone when they know where he stands. Where do you stand, Ben? And what do you stand for? Chapter 10, an imprint on the soul. Life leaves a mark. Who we are in the process of becoming. All right. Embrace the hurt and it deepens you. It makes you a richer person. But deny, reject, or hold it at bay, fight it off, and it just hardens you. You can lead as far as you grow, and you will grow only as far as you let yourself. That I put an asterisk by. I just think that so many people kneecap themselves in a way that they don't let them grow anymore for whatever excuse, whatever limitation, whatever self-limiting belief, and that's okay. Some people choose to be more grounded in reality. Words are the footprints of God is underlined. And I think that that's like one of those little nods to a higher vision, a higher meaning that, if it hits, it hits. Stand for something. Lead with your soul. What you have to give, you offer least of all through what you say. In greater part through what you do, but in greatest part through who you are. Competence matters. Character matters more. Character is what happens when life scratches itself onto your soul. You can lead only as far as you grow, and you will grow only as far as you let yourself. Chapter 11, Robbie. Don't try to control the sequence of events. Let it unfold. But more important than any of these is your being. By this, we mean your sense of respect, as well as self-worth of dignity and character. So all of those highlights, great quotes. Chapter 12, Chaos. And leaders stand for something. I just highlighted that. That's the only highlight in that chapter. Leaders stand for something. Chapter 13, the speech. Take the reins, take command, take. You hold each other up. Oh, he was giving a speech at this point, and he realized like what the company had that was so worth to them was that they have no backbiting, no internal politics. When bad things happen, they circle up their wagons and they protect those on their own turf. He said, you hold each other up. And that was just, it was powerful. It's a powerful story, right? Check out the book. Seems to me money doesn't build companies, companies build money, right? When you build a company, it's like building a money printing machine. It takes time and it's not easy. But once you do it, chapter 14, giving leadership. As a leader, you become the container of others' hopes. All right, my next highlight. And the moment you begin thinking that it's all about you, that you're the deal, is the moment you begin losing your capacity to positively influence others' lives, right? Don't get a big head, stay humble, take a step back, analyze the situation, right? The best way to increase your influence is to give it away. So how many times has that been repeated, right, throughout the book? How many times did we highlight it? It just that's one of the key themes throughout, and we're almost done. The only reason we still have that chair is that we gave it away. The more you give away, he remembered Auntell saying, the more you have. They're really closing it out here, and that's good. You can give leadership to your child, to a member of your work group, to a friend. Giving leadership is about empowering others and holding them up to anyone. When you believe in someone, when you promote them, champion them, respect their ideas, you give them leadership. And this is one of the great things that you can give people, right? Give them the opportunity. Giving leadership is a leadership style, but also more than that, it's a way of being. As a friend of mine says, your influence is determined by how abundantly you place other people's interests first, and that you did. Last night, you gave them leadership. Anyway, it closes out really well. So, Ben's keys to legendary leadership and wrapping of the book. Number one, hold the vision, build your people. 3 is do the work, stand for something. And 5 is practice giving leadership. Hold the vision, lead with your mind. Anyone can come up with a vision. The hard part is the holding. Building a business, building anything is an act of faith. Keep seeing in your mind's eye where it is you're going, even when nobody else does, especially when nobody else does. Never forget where you came from and watch your personal pronouns. Build your people. Lead from the heart. Give people something good to live up to, something great, and they usually will. The more you yield, the more power you have. The substance of influence is pull, not push. Tact is the language of strength. And don't react, respond. Do the work. Lead from your gut. Know your pegs and shims. Stay hugely humble. Stay grounded. Get mud on your boots and trust yourself. Stand for something. Lead with your soul. What you have to give, you offer least of all through what you say. In greater part through what you do, but in greatest part through who you are. Competence matters. Character matters more. Character is what happens when life scratches itself onto your soul. You can lead only as far as you grow, and you will only grow as far as you let yourself. Practice giving leadership. Don't get it backwards. Don't start thinking you're the deal. Great leadership is never about the leader. Great leadership is about holding people up. The best way to increase your influence is to give it away. The more you give, the more you have. It closes out with a discussion guide and a Q&A with the authors and some more really great information. But again, this book, I highly recommend. Definitely the first one if you haven't. I hope that was helpful. All right, smash that like button and consider subscribing. All right, smash that like bucket.